Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I never imagined that I would find myself entangled in a conflict with a tree removal company. My property had no trees. They had withered away, victims of time and a violent storm. Instead, I had transformed that space into a vibrant rose garden, which held a special place in my heart. Little did I know that the actions of a neglectful neighbor and an unscrupulous company would threaten the serenity of my home. It all began when my neighbor decided to enlist the services of a tree removal company to rid his yard of dead trees. Their presence shouldn't have affected me, or so I believed. But fate had other plans. Returning home from a grueling day at work, I was greeted by an unwelcome sight: a truck blocking my driveway, while large tree remnants obstructed my path. Annoyed and exhausted, I confronted the person in charge, demanding access to my own property. His explanation about needing space for the fallen debris barely pacified me, but I relented, agreeing to a compromise. He promised to inform me once they were finished for the day. Hoping the issue would resolve itself, I resigned to letting the matter go. Unfortunately, the man never returned as promised. Frustrated, I ventured outside to discover that the workers had left for the day, leaving my driveway still occupied. My anger surged, realizing they would return the following day. Despite my impending work obligations, I convinced my understanding boss to allow me to leave early, ensuring I wouldn't miss confronting them. I returned home to witness for the second time my driveway blocked by their truck. This time, both men I had spoken to previously were present, and I refused to maintain a facade of civility. Assertively, I voiced my grievances, reminding them that they were encroaching upon my property and obstructing my daily routine. Their flimsy justifications fell on deaf ears. I threatened to involve the authorities if they persisted. Although it seemed extreme, after 3 consecutive days of trespassing and driveway blockages, I felt it was the only course of action to protect my rights. Rushing back from work the next day, I found the tree removal team gone, but my yard was in ruins. The rose bushes, a cherished part of my home, had been mercilessly destroyed by falling tree fragments. All but a few had perished, leaving me devastated. To compound the misery, my driveway was blanketed in a layer of sawdust, evidence of the crew's negligence in cleaning up after themselves. Their regard for my side of the property was non-existent, as they had focused solely on my neighbor's pristine area. Despite my inclination to approach my neighbor, their absence left me without recourse. They had paid in advance for the work and were now blissfully unaware of the havoc wreaked upon my property. When I contacted the tree removal company, they callously dismissed my concerns, arguing that I had no right to complain since I hadn't hired them. Feeling helpless and frustrated, I found myself at a loss for how to proceed. Following the advice of my homeowner's insurance representative, I filed a police report, meticulously documenting every interaction and emphasizing the destruction of my cherished rose bushes caused by falling logs. I hoped that justice would prevail. The following day, a truck arrived to remove the logs and clean up the debris that had plagued my driveway. However, it became evident that I would not receive any compensation for my ruined rose garden. The cost of pursuing legal action against the company or my neighbor seemed prohibitive, leading me to reluctantly accept my losses. As long as my property was no longer violated, I chose to find solace in that victory. I fervently prayed to never encounter that tree removal company near my home again, knowing that I wouldn't hesitate to involve the police immediately, without waiting 3 agonizing days to take action against trespassers. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I worked at a fairly well-known restaurant in a small northern New England city as an assistant manager. The owners were very successful restaurateurs with several thriving non-chain establishments and spent maybe a day or 2 a month at our location. The rest of the time, there was a general manager in charge. We'll call her Jan. Jan was about as type A as they come. She was a middle-aged woman, beautiful and petite, and she always looked put together and polished. Jan had started with the owners a decade earlier in their first restaurant as a server, and had worked her way up to general manager over the years. At first, I just thought she had extremely high standards, which I respected. I have high standards as well and take pride in my work. I had been impressed by how the kitchens were spotless, the staff immaculate, like running a white-gloved hand under the back of the oven and it comes back white kinda clean, and the food always top quality. I had frequently been a customer and was thrilled that I got the job there. I had been in the business for a decade, and that restaurant was the place in our area. I was so excited. Unfortunately, I quickly learned why everything was so pristine and perfect. Jan was a tyrant. She was the kind of boss who soured the mood of the entire staff like a storm cloud hovering over us that never went away. Nothing was ever good enough, and the standards changed from day to day. On a good day, she would shut herself up in the office and then leave early. Good days were very rare and could turn into bad days at the drop of a dime. On bad days, you couldn't be perfect enough, and she would come up with new rules and regulations just to punish people. If a host called out sick, they were literal children, she would berate them on the phone and make them cry. If a cook made a mistake on a plate, she would humiliate them in front of the staff, accuse them of doing it on purpose, and then give us all the silent treatment for hours afterward. Seriously. If someone's cash out was off, even by a few cents, she would accuse them of theft and force me to cut down their hours. As a fellow manager, I was mostly spared her awful behavior, though I had to hear about her treatment from my staff almost every day. All of this was just run-of-the-mill bad boss stuff, until it came time for our yearly staff evaluation meetings. This is where Raul enters the story. Raul was a hard-working dishwasher who had moved to our state from Puerto Rico a few years earlier, and spoke English with some difficulty. Whenever I had to go over anything official with him, we would have a coworker translate between us to ensure we were both communicating clearly. Jan refused this courtesy to Raul. This made his evaluation pretty difficult. Raul managed to communicate to us that due to recent cuts in his hours, he would be forced to get a second job to pay the bills. Something about this absolutely set Jan off. She told him she would fire him if he dared. I could plainly see on the intake paperwork in front of me that Raul had been hired with the understanding that it would be a full-time position, so I pointed that out. Jan was furious but agreed through gritted teeth that if Raul agreed not to get a second job, she would bump his hours up to at least 35 hours a week. It was stated as clear as day, and I documented it in my daily manager logbook. Work went on as usual after that, and I didn't think much of this meeting again for a few months. Sometime later, while filling out information for tax returns, Jan called me into the office. I could tell she had pulled the tiny room apart looking for something. "All the information about our Puerto Rican employees is gone," she told me with a mixture of panic and suspicion. I looked at the files in question, and they all seemed to be in order, so I was confused and told her I couldn't help. A few minutes later, I walked back into the office to find her arguing with Rosa, our most talented chef and a Puerto Rican native. Rosa was perfectly fluent in English. "No, Rosa." Jan was speaking to Rosa as though she were hard of hearing or mentally slow. "Where is your green card?" "What are you talking about?" Rosa was confused. "Are you an illegal or something? Is that why one of you broke in here, to hide the proof?" Jan wasn't yelling, but her eyes were cold and flashing with rage. "What?" Rosa was starting to get angry now. It suddenly clicked for me, so I interrupted. "Jan, you do realize that Puerto Rico is a United States territory, right?" "Of course I know that," Jan snapped back. "Okay, so you know that Rosa has a social security number like any other American native." "Oh, right. Never mind, Rosa, you can go back to work." Jan did not apologize for accusing Rosa of theft. I was so done with this place after that. Jan did all kinds of little things like that, and she never apologized. I had already received a job offer for a place closer to my house when the final straw came. I was the closing manager one day and arrived just before the dinner rush to see Raul storming out the back door. He didn't speak much English, but his ducking idiot was very clear. Jan had lied about raising his hours to 35 per week, so Raul had gotten the second job he talked about. When Jan found out, she fired him, but not before saying something about how all you illegals are the same. She was really fixated on these American citizens being illegal aliens for some reason. By this point, I despised this woman too. She once told me my clothing made me look poor in front of the whole staff. I was wearing what she made me wear. Meanwhile, she wore open-toed shoes behind the line, which is against the health codes. And once her fake nail fell off into the coleslaw, and she wouldn't let anyone toss it out after she retrieved it. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I have a life to live. Since I knew I would be leaving soon anyway, I told Raul he should go after our boss for wrongful termination, since I had documented proof, with John's signature, that he had been promised more hours, and that John had broken the agreement, not Raul. The last time I saw John was on my way out of Raul's lawyer's office after giving a deposition about several labor laws she had violated, at least the ones that I knew about. Apparently, there were many others she had broken in front of other employees. She couldn't even look me in the eye. The best part? During my deposition, I learned that Jan was actually the one who was illegally in the country. Her green card had recently expired. She was Canadian. She ended up being sent back to Canada as a result of this case, and no one has heard from her since. Raoul was granted 6 months of unemployment pay, plus the restaurant had to pay his legal fees. They closed that location not long after. Maybe they should hire their managers more carefully next time. Jan, if you're reading this, I hope you got your act together. I also hope you learned to wear closed-toe shoes behind the line. You wouldn't want to end up as a huge, gigantic screw-up due to your own negligence, now would you? The next one is a petty revenge story. I am a grocery store cashier for a very small chain in southeastern Michigan. For 6 hours a day, 4 days a week, I ring order after order of groceries. Believe me, it gets monotonous. About a week or two ago, it was a super busy day. I had been going non-stop for 2 hours with no time between customers. That's when, during the short 5-minute lull that miraculously arrived, Karen came along. I went through my usual spiel, "Hi, how are you, paper or plastic, etc.," and started ringing her groceries. She had a lot of fruits and veggies, which is cool, better than some of the things I have to ring. Don't ask seriously. And then came the grapes. Now, don't get me wrong, I love grapes. Sweet, crunchy, tart, and they don't require really any prep before you can eat them. Yum. No, my issue was with the large spider that was in the bag with the grapes. I have a serious spider phobia. When I was a kid, a spider, no idea which kind, we were on a family biking trip through a nearby nature trail when it happened, bit me on the arm, and over the course of a few days, my parents just thought it was a mosquito bite at first. It swelled up into a big, hard lump the size of a softball. I still vividly remember the night they finally realized that they needed to take action and rushed me to the nearest hospital ER. Traumatizing. Ever since, I can't see a spider without shrieking and freezing up. Any other bug in the house? No problem. I see a spider, one of my brothers has to come rescue me. So, as you can imagine, the large bag of grape spider did not go over well. I managed to mostly quell the shriek, instead letting out a strangled yelp, and jolted back from the register an offending bag, and refused to touch it again until the spider was very dead. My grocery store is one of those that still has a separate bagger job, so I wasn't alone at the register. The very nice kid who is my current bagger was kind enough to come around and remove the spider-infested sack of fruit and went to get Karen a new bag. I apologized and started to scan again, and as soon as he left, the ridicule began. "It was just a spider. Why did you freak out? Are you seriously telling me that a grown-ass woman had to have a teenage boy rescue her from an itty-bitty spider? How pathetic. Just get over it. It was the size of a pea at best." "I carried that bag all the way over here. I'm scared of spiders and I was just fine. You shouldn't have had an issue swiping it and moving on for 5 seconds. And so on and so forth. Meanwhile, I just had to sit there and smile at her. As soon as he came back, she shut up and was all smiles and compliments for such a nice young man. That was where I decided to get petty. Now, in my store, produce is rung up one of 2 ways. It might be the same everywhere, I don't know, but anyway, it is either rung up by count or by weight, so we have a scale built into the register to weigh items. Grapes are priced by weight, so I went ahead and dropped the nice new spider-free bag on the scale. And while I typed in the produce code, I made sure to ever so stealthily place my thumb on that scale and apply the slightest bit of pressure, magically turning 2 pound 7 ounces into 4 pound 2 ounces, and at $3.99 per pound, it made a difference. Mind you, Karen had a huge order, so that 1 pound 7 ounces didn't noticeably affect the total. But if Karen was going to mock me like that, then turn around like she'd done nothing wrong and praise my coworker, she was going to have to pay for it. And pay for it she did. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So I used to work at a home improvement retailer that's popular in the Midwest United States. Nothing bad against the company, other than the simple fact that it's retail, and I had my fair share of customer stories. But today, this story is about my assistant manager at the time. At the time of this story, I was working as a morning stalker with 2 other guys, and despite only being with the company store for 6 months, I was their senior in seniority. The older gentleman, who was the downstalker, took excess product on the top shelf and put it on the store shelves, was a retired aviation engineer who just got bored of retirement and wanted something active. Kind of important to note. Our department manager, who was my first and absolute best manager, had a policy of rule, call it what you will, where us stalkers would put away the heavy bulk items that could be taken off the pallets and thrown onto the shelves without unwrapping anything. Think pet food, cat litter, 5-gallon, 20-liter, buckets of paint, etc. Yes, I know, weird combo, but that was what our department did, paint and grocery. And we would work through the bulk items, working our way down to the smaller items, until we got to the smallest items, like theater box candy. One morning we came into work on this particularly fine Friday morning where the manager had the day off, and it was the assistant manager for that morning as well as the whole weekend. Managers alternated working on weekends, a reason I refused a management position. And it was this day that she felt she needed to up her game or something because she told us in the morning note to us stalkers that we needed to work on the smaller items first and work our way up to the larger items. We all exchanged looks and knew this was a bad idea, so I told them to just do the normal stuff, and I'd ask her when she came in an hour and a half later at 6:30 a.m. She came in, and fortunately for us, the other stalker and I had finished our respective pallets, while the downstalker was just working the usual rounds, walking up and down the ladder. I asked her if she really wanted to proceed with this line of process, as there were 10 pallets in the receiving area for our department, and 6 of them were bulk items we could have done in less than an hour. One of the reasons we stalkers did the bulk items, as our manager would jokingly put it, was that he didn't want the sales team to smell like crap, which makes sense if you ask me because I've smelled myself on the way home after working bulk freight all day, but I digress. But she was adamant that we did the small piddly stuff so the sales team could focus on making sales and other more important tasks. One thing I failed to mention is that it was thunderstorming this Friday, which is a good day to me as I might as well live in Seattle or other places where it rains a lot. This caused sales to drop dramatically at our store, given its location in our city, as only contractors don't give a hoot about weather. Without skipping a beat, the other stalker and I nodded our heads, and when the assistant manager wasn't looking, I grabbed the note she left for us from the recycling box we had to use for later, as I knew where this was going after how the day was going. To make an already long story not so long, the story repeated itself on Saturday, but rather than do a couple of bulk items in the hour and a half we had before the assistant manager came in, we complied and did the small items like candy, off-the-shelf meds like aspirin, and other small pain-in-the-ass items. We got maybe 7 pallets of freight out on Friday, 4 of them being bulk. On that Saturday, only 2 despite another 15 pallets coming in. Stalkers didn't work on Sundays. Us stalkers would work from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., and it was Monday morning when the managers would switch places, so the department manager would be in at noon that day. It was about 8:30 a.m. when the assistant manager realized how badly she messed up, as we had over 10 pallets in the back aisle. But receiving was packed with another 20. 30 in receiving, with over 20 of these pallets being bulk items we would have had done easily. Being friends with several people on sales, we came to find out that she told none of the salespeople to work on freight, and would even tell the ones who would work on freight when their daily tasks were done to work on something else, like straightening the shelves and whatnot. I also found out from friends in receiving that there were 2 more trucks coming in that day, which caused me and the other stalkers to giggle a bit. At about 8:30, the assistant manager told us, including the nice 67-year-old downstalker, to start working bulk freight to get as much out. The thing was, I had class at 10 a.m. and needed to go home to shower so I didn't smell bad. The downstalker smirked and told the other stalker that we were going to leave on time, with him and the other stalker coming up with their own reasons for having to leave on time. I don't remember what they said as a reason. Come that Tuesday, the department manager's note to us told us to work on nothing but bulk freight, and he wanted to talk to me specifically when he came in at 6:30. As soon as he came in, and before he could say a word to ask what happened, I took the papers the assistant manager gave us those 2 days, and placed them in front of him. If disappointed anger could kill, then his flared nostril deep breath and exhale would have killed the city, as his eyes rolled back, and he shook his head before laughing, before bringing the other stalker over and telling us that whoever got the most pallets done would get $20. Sad to say, I didn't win, but I did get a second-place $10 bill. As I said, he was the best manager I ever had so far, and before it's asked, we got 25 pallets done between us in those 2.5 hours. I did 12, the other stalker did 13, and we joked that he won because he took the last bulk pallet. The best part was the manager thanking us, handing us our winnings, and then telling us at 9 to go home and shower because we smelled like crap. We still laugh about this to this day. The next one is an entitled people story. I was on an airline with my family who were stirred in the 1 or 2 rows in front of and behind me. The random girl next to me at the window seat was talking to her friend who was sitting directly behind me. The friend then asks me if I can switch seats with her so she can sit next her friend. It's still within the vicinity of my family, so I agree to it and we swap positions. She's Ren laughing with her friend and turns and say, "Okay, my seat is way back there." Since she had standing in the row behind me talking to her friend, it had appeared like her seat was one row behind, but her actual seat was like 20 rows behind at the back of the plane. I told her, "I thought you wanted me to switch one row back. I'm not moving to the back of the plane. You didn't mention that before, and I can see you did it on purpose because you're laughing about it." She told me I agreed to switch and it's too late now, as if we're in high school. I told the flight attendant that the girl is in my seat, and she told the flight attendant that I agreed to switch. Without getting into who said what, I told the flight attendant, "I didn't AG, and I've never spoken to this person in my life." They were angry and yelling, but it was either go to her seat or get off the plane. The only issue I was concerned about was having to awkwardly sit next to her friend for a few hours. The situation resolved itself when they got someone from the back to switch with them. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.